The world knew Jonathan Whitmore as a man who never apologized. At 52, he was the kind of billionaire whose name was etched into skylines. Glass towers carried his signature. Luxury developments rose wherever he pointed. Governors returned his calls. News anchors debated his opinions in primetime segments. But what made Jonathan Whitmore unforgettable wasn't just his wealth. It was his words. He had built a reputation for saying what others wouldn't dare to say out loud. Comments about standards, about discipline, about preserving the character of neighborhoods. Years earlier, leaked audio captured him insisting certain communities needed to be kept pure. The fallout had been explosive. Protests, boycotts, headlines that burned his name into controversy. To his loyal supporters, he was brave. To millions of others, he was something far uglier. Jonathan dismissed the outrage as exaggeration. Media distortion. Political correctness runs wild. In his world of marble floors and curated boardrooms, criticism felt distant, abstract. He surrounded himself with executives who nodded in agreement and advisors who polished every misstep into carefully crafted statements. And yet, there was one place where the armor slipped. His daughter, 9-year-old Lily Whitmore, was sunlight in a tailored world of steel. Since the death of Jonathan's wife 3 years earlier, Lily had become the center of his existence. He rearranged meetings for her dance recitals. He personally drove her to rehearsal every Saturday morning, even when a chauffeur waited in the driveway. That Saturday looked ordinary. The city hummed with weekend traffic. The downtown district Jonathan often complained was declining, bustled with noise, buses exhaling at stops, music drifting from corner stores, pedestrians weaving through crosswalks. A few blocks from Lily's dance academy, beneath a concrete overpass where shadows lingered even in daylight, a small homeless encampment had taken root. Among them was a 16-year-old black girl, Amara. Jonathan had seen her before. He'd seen her pushing a cart filled with cans, sitting cross-legged with a worn paperback, standing in line outside a grocery store waiting to help unload crates for a few crumpled bills. He never looked twice. To him, she represented statistics, talking points, everything he believed about failure and personal responsibility. That morning, Lily burst out of the academy doors, pink ballet shoes slung over her shoulder, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Daddy, watch this," she called, already halfway into a spinning demonstration. Jonathan stood near the curb, scrolling through a message from a state senator. The intersection was loud, 4 lanes wide, impatient engines growling at a late yellow light. Lily laughed and stepped backward off the sidewalk. Time fractured. Jonathan looked up. A delivery truck barreled through the intersection, engine roaring. "Too fast, too close," he shouted her name. But the sound was swallowed by screeching brakes. Across the street, Amara saw it all unfold in a single, terrible instant. The angle of the truck, the small body in its path. The father froze. She didn't calculate. She ran. Her bag of collected cans clattered across the pavement as she sprinted into traffic. Tires screamed. Horns blared. She lunged, arms outstretched, grabbing Lily and throwing both of them forward as the truck thundered past, missing them by inches. The force sent them crashing to the asphalt. Silence followed. A stunned, heavy silence. Jonathan's heart slammed against his ribs as he reached them. Lily was crying, scraped, shaken. Alive. Alive. Amara lay on her side, blood seeping from a deep scrape along her forearm where skin had met concrete. A crowd began to gather. Phones lifted. Whisper spread. "That's Whitmore or Jonathan," but the girl. The same girl he had ignored. The same kind of person he had criticized on national television. She tried to sit up, wincing. She wouldn't meet his eyes. "I just saw her," she murmured. "I couldn't let her get hurt." There was no performance in her voice, no calculation, just simple truth. Something inside Jonathan shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but like a crack forming deep beneath a foundation. He had spent decades constructing the worldview. And in less than 3 seconds, a homeless teenager had run into traffic to save his child without hesitation. The truck driver stumbled out, pale and shaking. Bystanders called ambulances. Lily clung to her father's suit jacket. Jonathan didn't notice the cameras at first. He only saw the blood on Amra's arm. And for the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't rationalize. A way. Not outrage. Not an inconvenience, but disorientation, because the narrative he had repeated so confidently no longer fit what he had just witnessed. As the sirens approached and the crowd thickened, Jonathan Whitmore, a man who controlled empires, realized he was staring at a truth he could not control. And this was only the beginning. Before we go further, I just want to say something from the heart. I worked incredibly hard to bring this story to life for you. And if stories about kindness and transformation mean something to you, please consider subscribing. It truly helps this channel grow. Now, to understand why this moment would change everything, we need to step back to the life of the girl beneath the overpass, long before anyone knew her name. Long before anyone in a tailored suit learned her name, Amara Johnson had already lived through more endings than most people twice her age. She used to wake up to the smell of cinnamon, oatmeal. That was the first thing she missed. Her mother had worked double shifts at a nursing home in Brookdale, coming home exhausted, but still humming softly while stirring a dented pot on their tiny stove. Their apartment had peeling paint and a heater that groaned all winter. But it had warmth, it had a routine, it had safety, and it had books. Amra's mother believed books were ladders. They don't look like much, she would say, pressing a worn paperback into her daughter's hands, but they take you places no one can block. When cancer came, it came fast. Within 8 months, hospital rooms replaced kitchen mornings. The oatmeal disappeared. The humming stopped. At 15, Amara stood alone in a hallway outside an ICU unit, clutching a thin silver necklace her mother had given her, a small crescent moon charm worn smooth from years of being rubbed between anxious fingers. Stay curious, her mother had whispered during their last lucid conversation. Curiosity keeps you alive. After the funeral, the system moved quickly. Temporary foster placement, a short-term home, then another. Her belongings fit into a single trash bag. When she turned 16, the paperwork shifted again. Funding limits, administrative language, technical expiration of placement. No one used the word abandonment, but that was what it felt like. For 11 months, Amara had been surviving beneath the overpass, just 4 blocks from Lily's dance academy. The space was a patchwork of tarps, shopping carts, and salvaged plywood. When it rained, water pooled near the columns. When winter crept in, the cold seeped through every layer of clothing. Her mornings began before sunrise. She would fold the thin blanket she shared with another teenage girl, Kaija, tuck the crescent necklace beneath her shirt, and push her cart toward the recycling bins behind restaurants. Aluminum cans were currency, so were plastic bottles. By 8 o'clock, she was often at Delgado's grocery, a narrow corner store with a faded awning. Mr. Delgado let her help unload produce trucks in exchange for small bills and bruised fruit he couldn't sell. She never begged. She worked when traffic slowed near the intersection. She watched for Lily's pink backpack. She didn't know the girl's name then, only that she laughed easily and skipped instead of walking. Sometimes, while waiting for the grocery deliveries, Amara read. The public library donation bin was placed outside on Wednesdays before items were sorted. If she arrived early, she could rescue discarded books before they were thrown away. Some were missing covers, some had water damage. She read everything. History textbooks, poetry anthologies, old SAT prep guides from 3 years ago. At night, under the dim yellow glow of a streetlight, she wrote in a small spiral notebook she had found half used in a trash can. The first page held a single sentence. I am not what happened to me. She filled the rest with vocabulary words she didn't recognize, copied passages from novels and sketches of buildings she imagined designing someday, because that was her quiet dream. Architecture. She would stare at Jonathan Whitmore's glass towers downtown and imagine redesigning them, adding public gardens, Community libraries on ground floors. Apartments affordable enough for families like hers once was. She never spoke this dream out loud. Dreams felt fragile in places where survival was loud. Despite everything. Bitterness never rooted in her. When younger kids in the encampment cried from hunger, she shared half her apple. When arguments broke out between adults numbed by addiction and exhaustion, she walked away instead of escalating. Her dignity was quiet but unshakable. At night, when the traffic above roared like distant thunder, she would press the crescent necklace into her palm and whisper her mother's words, "Stay curious." Curiosity meant asking why buildings were placed where they were, why some neighborhoods had trees lining sidewalks while others had none, why opportunity clustered in certain zip codes. Curiosity kept her from shrinking. There were nights she cried, silent tears, so no one would hear. But even then, she wrote. One evening, after finishing a chapter from a donated physics book, she looked up at the skyline in the distance. The towers shimmered against the dark sky. She didn't resent them. She studied them. "I'll build something better one day," she murmured to herself. Not bigger, better. On the morning of the accident, she had woken up hungry. The previous day's recycling haul had been small. She'd counted $4.75 in coins, unfolded them carefully into her sock for safekeeping. She planned to use it to print practice test sheets at the public library. That notebook, the one filled with vocabulary words and sketches, was tucked inside her canvas bag alongside 3 empty water bottles and a bruised pair from Delgado's. When she saw Lily step off that curb, she didn't see a billionaire's daughter. She saw a child. And in the half-second before she ran, something instinctive surfaced, something older than anger, older than systems, older than neglect. Protection. Later, in the hospital hallway, as a nurse cleaned gravel from her arm, Amara tried not to think about the fact that if she had miscalculated by even a fraction of a second, she would be dead. She didn't regret it, but she felt the weight of what almost was. When Jonathan Whitmore stood at the foot of her hospital bed, his tailored coat draped over his arm, she felt exposed in ways she couldn't articulate, not because of her torn sneakers, but because for the first time in months, someone with power was looking at her, not through her. She avoided his eyes. "I just reacted," she said quietly. Anyone would have, but that wasn't true. Not everyone would have run into traffic. When the nurse finished wrapping her arm and left the room, Amara reached into her bag to make sure her notebook was still there. It was slightly bent, smudged at the edges. She traced the words on the first page. "I'm not what happened to me." She didn't know yet that her life was about to shift. She didn't know that the man sitting silently in that hospital chair would soon be forced to confront the architecture of his own beliefs. All she knew was that tomorrow she would likely return to the overpass, back to the traffic noise, back to the recycling bins, back to studying under streetlights. But for the first time in a long while, a strange feeling settled in her chest. Not hope exactly, but possibility. And possibility, even in the harshest conditions, can feel like oxygen. Do you believe talent can survive even in the harshest conditions? Tell me what you think in the comments. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic, and warm plastic. Machines hummed. Nurses moved in efficient rhythms. Outside the window, Brookdale's skyline shimmered in late afternoon light, including 3 towers bearing the Whitmore name. Amara noticed that. Jonathan noticed her. Noticing, Lily sat upright in her bed with a cartoon-patterned blanket tucked around her waist. A small bandage rested on her knee. She looked more confused than injured. "Daddy," she whispered, glancing toward Amara. "She saved me." Jonathan swallowed. "I know." He had repeated those words to himself at least 20 times in the past hour. "She saved me." No boardroom language could dilute that sentence. No media spin could restructure it. Amara sat on the edge of a separate bed, her forearm freshly stitched. The hospital had given her a clean sweatshirt after cutting away her torn sleeve. It hung loosely on her frame. Jonathan cleared his throat. "What's your name?" She hesitated. Years of caution had trained her not to give information too freely. Amara, he nodded slowly, as if committing it to memory. I'm Jonathan Whitmore. I know, she replied quietly. There was no accusation in her tone, no admiration either, just acknowledgement. That unsettled him more than hostility would have. Lily studied Amara with open curiosity, the kind children carry before society teaches them filters. Do you live near my dance school? Lily asked. Amara's fingers tightened briefly around the strap of her bag. Close by. Jonathan caught the hesitation. He understood it. A nurse entered to check Lily's vitals. Jonathan stepped aside, then looked back at Amara. Do you have someone I can call? Family? The question lingered between them. Amara shook her head once. No. Jonathan's chest tightened, not from guilt, but from an unfamiliar discomfort. He was accustomed to solutions. Problems had leverage points, contracts, transfers, legal pathways, but this girl's reality didn't fit into transactional logic. He sat down across from her. You ran without thinking, he said, almost to himself. She shrugged. She's a kid. That truck would have killed you. Maybe, she said it plainly, as if discussing whether. Jonathan studied her more closely now, the worn edges of her sneakers, the careful way she held her bag protectively against her side, the faint outline of something metallic beneath her sweatshirt collar. What's in the bag? Lily asked, leaning forward. Jonathan almost interrupted, but Amara answered first. Just our stuff. Lily's gaze was persistent but gentle. Like what? After a pause, Amara unzipped the bag halfway and pulled out the spiral notebook. It looked ordinary, slightly bent, edges softened from use. I write in it, she said. Jonathan felt something shift again. What do you write? Words I don't know yet. Things I'm trying to understand. Lily brightened. Like homework. Amara gave a small smile. Kind of. Jonathan extended his hand. May I? Another hesitation. Then she passed it to him. He flipped it open. The first page stopped him. I am not what happened to me. The handwriting was steady, disciplined. He turned pages slowly. Vocabulary definitions carefully copied. Geometry sketches. Floor plan drawings. Not random doodles, but measured designs with labeled dimensions. He paused on one. A high-rise building reimagined with rooftop gardens, community study spaces, and lower floors marked public access library. You drew this? He asked. Yes. What is it? A building that belongs to everyone, she answered. Simply. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Belongs. To everyone. He had spent decades building properties, accessible only to a fraction of society. Lily leaned over his arm. It's beautiful, she said. Amara looked down at her hands. It's just an idea. Jonathan flipped further. SAT math practice. Essay drafts. A list titled, Colleges with Architecture Programs. You're studying for college? He asked, disbelief creeping into his tone, before he could stop it. Yes. How? The library has free internet. The simplicity of her answer carried more weight than a speech. The room fell quiet. Jonathan felt something unfamiliar creeping up his spine. Not pity. Recognition. This girl, the one he would have previously categorized without hesitation, possessed discipline, intelligence, vision. Outside the door, he could hear distant murmurs. A hospital staff member whispered, "Is that really him?" A security aide nodded subtly toward Jonathan. The social hierarchy in the room was clear, and yet it no longer felt stable. A hospital administrator entered with careful politeness. Mr. Whitmore, there are reporters gathering downstairs. Of course there were. The city already knew the truck had nearly hit his daughter. Footage would surface. Narratives would form. He glanced at Amara. What happens next? Lily asked softly. The question hung in the air, larger than she understood. Jonathan closed the notebook and handed it back gently. Next, he said slowly, eyes still on Amara. We make sure everyone is okay. But internally, another question had begun forming. How had he been so certain about people he had never truly seen? The administrator shifted awkwardly. There are discussions already online about the girl who intervened. Jonathan knew what that meant. speculation, background digging, old soundbites resurfacing. Public tension was rising. And for the first time in years, Jonathan Whitmore felt watched not as a titan of industry, but as a man whose past words might collide violently with present reality. He stood. "I'll handle the press," he said. He turned back to Amara. "Don't leave yet, please." It wasn't an order. It was a request. She studied him carefully, weighing intention. Finally, she nodded once. As Jonathan stepped into the hallway, cameras flashing at the far end, he felt the ground beneath his worldview beginning to shift. The girl from the overpass was no longer invisible, and neither were the cracks in his own certainty. Have you ever misjudged someone before knowing their full story? The hallway outside the hospital room was a corridor of flashing lights. Cameras rose the moment Jonathan Whitmore stepped into view. Reporters called his name with urgent intensity. "Mr. Whitmore, is your daughter okay? Is it true a homeless teen pulled her out of traffic? Do you have a statement?" For years, Jonathan had navigated press storms with calculated composure. He understood optics. He understood power dynamics. He understood how to speak without saying anything at all. But this moment felt different, because behind him, in a quiet hospital room, sat the living contradiction to everything he had publicly claimed to believe. He raised his hand, signaling for calm. "My daughter is stable," he began, "and we are deeply grateful to the young woman who intervened." He paused. "Grateful." The word felt small compared to the weight in his chest. She acted with extraordinary courage. He didn't elaborate. He didn't deflect. He turned and walked back into the room before more questions could trap him. Inside, the noise faded. The door clicked shut. Amara sat exactly where he'd left her, notebook resting on her lap. Lily had drifted into a light sleep, her small hands still clutching the edge of her father's coat. Jonathan stood there for a long moment, studying the scene. Then he did something he rarely did in business meetings. He pulled up a chair, not across the room, not towering over her, beside her. "I owe you more than thanks," he said quietly. Amara didn't respond immediately. She had learned that powerful men often attached conditions to gratitude. "You don't owe me," she said. "I just reacted. You risked your life." She looked down at the crescent necklace, now visible above her collar. "My mom used to say, if you can help someone, you do it. No debate." Jonathan noticed the shift in her voice at the word mom. "Where is she?" he asked gently. The question was not transactional. It was human. "She passed away last year." "I'm sorry." She nodded once. "And your father?" A slight tightening in her jaw. "He wasn't around." Silence settled again. Heavier this time, Jonathan's gaze drifted to Lily. "When my wife died," he said slowly, surprising himself, "I thought money could buffer the pain. It can't." Amara didn't look up, but she listened. "I buried myself in work. I convinced myself I was protecting Lily by controlling everything around her." He exhaled. "But today, I couldn't control anything." That admission hung between them like fragile glass. Amara studied him now, trying to discern sincerity from performance. "You said outside," she began carefully, "that you're grateful." "I am. Even though I'm—" She stopped. He waited. "Even though I'm from the kind of neighborhood you talk about." The question was not aggressive. It was honest. And it landed with surgical precision. Jonathan felt heat rise in his chest, not anger, but exposure. "You've heard what I've said." He acknowledged. "It's on the internet," she replied softly. Of course it was. He had once described certain communities as declining because of cultural breakdown. He had suggested stricter residency standards in developments he owned. He had defended comments about preserving character. To him, those words felt abstract. To her, they were personal. "I never meant," he began, then stopped himself. Intent was no longer a shield. "What did you mean?" she asked quietly. The simplicity of the question stripped away his usual rhetoric. He searched for an answer, and found none that didn't sound hollow. "I thought I was defending structure," he said finally. "Standards, stability, And you thought people like me threatened that? She asked. The phrasing was calm, but it pierced. Jonathan didn't respond immediately, because the truthful answer, once spoken, would force him to confront something he had avoided for years. Yes, he said at last. The word was barely audible. Amara absorbed it without flinching. I collect cans, she said. I study at the library. I sketch buildings I'll probably never get to build. I watch kids in my camp, so they don't wander into traffic. She met his eyes fully now. How exactly do I threaten your stability? The room felt smaller. Jonathan saw Lily's sleeping face in his peripheral vision. He saw his late wife in memory. The way she used to challenge him when his language sharpened into judgment. He heard her voice. Jonathan, people are not categories. He had dismissed her concerns then, framing them as emotional idealism. But now, the moral mirror was undeniable. The person who embodied everything he had criticized had saved what he loved most. And she wasn't angry. She wasn't demanding. She was simply asking him to reconcile his logic with reality. I was wrong, he said. Quietly, the words felt foreign in his mouth. Amara blinked, surprised. I built opinions on distance, he continued, on data, on what I thought I understood. He looked at her notebook again. I never bothered to see the individuals. A nurse entered briefly to check Lily's fall line, then left. The interruption gave Jonathan space to gather himself. When you ran into that street, he said, voice tightening, you didn't evaluate demographics. You didn't calculate risk based on status. No, she replied. You just saw my daughter. Yes, he nodded slowly. And I've spent years not seeing you. The admission settled, like a stone dropped into deep water. Internal conflict churned inside him, pride battling humility, reputation battling truth. His mind raced through potential consequences, board members, investors, political allies. If he publicly shifted his stance, it wouldn't go unnoticed. He had built a brand around certain rhetoric. Changing course would invite scrutiny, accusations of hypocrisy. But another image overpowered those calculations. Lily in the street. Frozen. And Amara running toward danger without hesitation. For the first time in decades, Jonathan Whitmore felt small in the presence of someone with nothing. He stood slowly. I don't know what this looks like yet, he admitted. But I know I can't walk away unchanged. Amara's expression softened slightly, though caution remained. Change isn't a press conference, she said quietly. It's what you do when no one's watching. The words landed with quiet authority. Jonathan felt them anchor somewhere deep. He glanced at Lily, then back at Amara. A decision was forming, not fully articulated, not yet public, but undeniable. He would not let this moment become a headline and then fade. He would return. He would listen. He would act. But how? And how far? Remained uncertain. As the sun dipped lower outside the hospital window, casting long shadows across the room, Jonathan Whitmore understood something with painful clarity. This wasn't about charity. It was about reckoning. And reckoning always demands a cost. He looked at Amara one last time before stepping out to make arrangements for Lily's discharge. I'll be back, he said. Not as a promise for publicity, but as a commitment to himself. If you were in this position, what would you do? 3 days passed before Jonathan returned to the overpass. 3 days of board meetings he barely heard. 3 days of headlines dissecting the accident. 3 days of watching Lily sleep more closely than he ever had before. At night, he replayed the moment in his mind. The truck's roar, Lily's small body in the road, Amara running without hesitation. But what haunted him most wasn't the near-dash tragedy. It was the question she had asked. How exactly do I threaten your stability? He had built his empire on stability. Predictable returns, controlled environments, gated communities. Yet everything stable in his life had nearly shattered in seconds. On the 4th morning, instead of heading to his downtown office tower, Jonathan told his driver to stop 2 blocks from the dance academy. I'll walk from here, he said. The driver hesitated, surprised, but complied. Jonathan moved down the sidewalk without an entourage, without cameras, Without announcement, the air carried the sharp scent of exhaust and damp concrete. As he approached the overpass, he slowed. He had driven past this space dozens of times, never through it. Now he stepped beneath it. The temperature dropped slightly in the shadow. Makeshift tents lined the concrete columns. A shopping cart rattled somewhere in the distance. Low voices murmured over a portable radio. This wasn't a statistic. It was a living ecosystem of survival. A woman eyed him warily. A man shifted protectively near a stack of folded blankets. Jonathan's tailored coat felt out of place here. He scanned the space. Then he saw her. Amara sat cross-legged on flattened cardboard, notebook open, pencil moving steadily. The crescent necklace glinted faintly in filtered light. She looked up before he spoke. Her expression didn't change. Not surprised. Not welcoming. Just observant. You came back, she said. I said I would. He stepped closer, careful not to invade her space. Her arm was still wrapped in fresh gauze. Does it hurt? He asked. Only when I move it wrong. A child darted past them, laughing. Amara instinctively tracked his movement until he disappeared behind a pillar. You're busy, Jonathan noted. Always, he nodded, absorbing the layers of responsibility resting on her thin shoulders. I've been thinking, he began. She closed her notebook slowly. That can be dangerous, she replied, not unkindly. For the first time, a faint smile touched his face. Yes, he admitted. It can. A few people nearby watched the interaction. With cautious curiosity, Jonathan lowered his voice. I want to help. The phrase felt inadequate, even as he said it. Amara's posture stiffened slightly. Help how? There it was. The hesitation forged by broken promises and transactional charity. I'm not here to offer publicity, he continued carefully, or to parade you in front of cameras. She studied him, measuring tone against body language. I can arrange temporary housing, he said. Somewhere safe, quiet. No obligations attached. No obligations, she echoed. No contracts, no statements, no expectations of gratitude. Her fingers traced the edge of her notebook. And after temporary, the question carried experience. She had known too many short-term solutions. Jonathan inhaled slowly. I don't want this to be temporary. She didn't respond. I reviewed your notebook, he continued. You're serious about architecture. Her eyes flickered, not with pride, but with protectiveness over something deeply personal. Yes, there are preparatory programs, tutoring, scholarships. I can fund those. And what do you get? She asked directly. The bluntness caught him off guard. Nothing, he said. She held his gaze. No one does something for nothing. He felt the weight of her truth. I get to correct something I've misunderstood for years, he said finally. I have to make sure the person who saved my daughter doesn't return to sleeping under concrete. Silence stretched around them. Life continued. A kettle boiling over a portable stove. Distant traffic overhead. Amara looked past him toward the street, as if envisioning escape routes. I've had offers before, she said quietly. Church groups, volunteers, they mean well. But it's always temporary, and when it ends, it hurts worse than before. Jonathan nodded. I can't erase that, he said. But I can commit long-term. She searched his face for performance. What does long-term mean to you? She pressed. It means stability, he answered. Education through graduation. Housing without expiration dates. Mentorship without spotlight. Her breathing slowed slightly. And if I fail? She asked. The vulnerability in the question was subtle but profound. Jonathan didn't hesitate. Then we adjust. Failure isn't disqualification. A breeze swept through the underpass, rustling tarps. You'd leave this place, he added softly. But not alone. Her eyes moved to the younger kids playing near a pillar. They'd still be here, she said. He understood. The guilt embedded in that sentence. I can't fix everything overnight, he said honestly. But this can start somewhere. She looked back at him. Trust wasn't built in moments. It was built in consistency. I need time, she said. Take it. He reached into his coat and removed a simple business card. Not embossed gold, not branded with titles, Just his name and direct number. If you decide no, he said, placing it beside her notebook. I'll respect it. He stepped back, giving her physical space. I'll be nearby this afternoon, he added, at the cafe on Brookdale Avenue. He turned to leave, then paused. And Amara? She looked up. You never threatened my stability. His voice carried quiet conviction now. You revealed its fragility. He walked away without waiting for a response. Behind him, Amara stared at the card resting against her spiral notebook. Opportunity had knocked before, but this felt different. Not because of wealth, because of humility. Still, trust is expensive when you've grown up with nothing to cushion betrayal. She folded the card carefully and slipped it between the pages of her notebook. Above her, traffic roared. Ahead of her, uncertainty waited. And somewhere across town, a man who had built towers was learning how to build something far more delicate. Trust. The decision now rested in her hands. Amara didn't call him that afternoon. She waited 2 days. 2 days of watching the business card tucked between the pages of her notebook. 2 days of imagining worst-case scenarios. 2 days of listening to the quiet voice in her head that sounded like her mother. Stay curious. On the third morning, she walked to the public library and used one of the computers near the back wall. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing his name. Jonathan Whitmore. The search results flooded the screen. Towers, interviews, controversies, political donations, viral clips of statements she remembered too well. She scrolled further. Then she found something newer. A short press clip from the hospital hallway. He looked different. Not polished. Not combative. Grateful. She stared at the paused image for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out the card, and dialed. He answered on the second ring. Jonathan Whitmore. It's Amara. He didn't pretend to be surprised. I'm glad you called. There was no pressure in his tone. I have conditions, she said immediately. A pause. Then, good. They met not at his office, not at his home, but at a small cafe with no cameras, no security detail hovering nearby. Amara chose the seat facing the exit. He noticed. He didn't comment. I won't move anywhere without seeing it first, she said. I won't stop studying, and I don't want to be displayed. You won't be, he replied. And if I say this isn't working later, you can walk away. The agreement was simple. No dramatic handshakes, no grand speeches, just clarity. That week, Jonathan arranged a small furnished apartment in a quiet residential building. Not one of his luxury high-rises, but a modest, clean unit close to a public high school with strong academic programs. The first night Amara stepped inside, she didn't sit down immediately. She walked slowly from room to room. The carpet was soft beneath her sneakers. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. The bathroom light flicked on without buzzing. She turned the shower handle cautiously. Hot water rushed out, steady, uninterrupted. She stood there longer than necessary, staring at the steam rising into the air. That evening, she slept in a bed that didn't require layering cardboard beneath it, but sleep didn't come easily. Silence felt unfamiliar without the constant roar of traffic overhead. Around midnight, she sat up, heart racing. It took a moment to realize she was safe. Across town, Jonathan lay awake too. Not from fear. From reflection. He thought about the cost of pride, about the architecture of belief systems, how easily they become fortresses against empathy. The next morning, he drove Lily to the apartment. Lily carried a small pink gift bag. Inside was a brand new spiral notebook. I thought you might need another one, Lily said shyly. Amara's throat tightened. Thank you. It was the first time Lily had seen where Amara would live now. This is nice, Lily said, spinning slowly in the living room. It smells like cookies. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. It does. Amara smiled faintly. Probably the air freshener. The weeks that followed unfolded gradually. No dramatic montages, just small, consistent shifts. Clean clothes folded neatly in drawers, instead of stuffed in a canvas bag. Warm meals, eaten at a table instead of on concrete. a school counselor meeting with her to review transcripts and placement exams. Jonathan funded private tutoring quietly, no press releases. Amra's mornings changed. She woke to an alarm clock instead of sunrise through highway gaps. She walked to school, carrying textbooks instead of recycling bags. Her intelligence surfaced quickly. Teachers noticed. Her math instructor pulled her aside after class one afternoon. "You think in structures," he said, impressed by her geometry proofs. She didn't tell him where she'd learned to think that way. At night, she studied at the small kitchen table, a crescent necklace resting against her collarbone. Jonathan visited occasionally, not intrusively, but present. Sometimes he brought groceries, sometimes he simply asked about school. Their conversations remained careful at first. Trust builds in layers. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the windows, Amara laughed at something Lily said. It was a clear, unguarded sound. Jonathan froze slightly in the doorway. It was the first time he'd heard her laugh without restraint. Lily began insisting Amara attend her dance recitals. "You're part of my lucky charm," she declared. At the next Saturday rehearsal, Jonathan stood beside Amara near the curb, the same intersection. The same traffic light. But everything felt altered. "Are you still nervous here?" he asked quietly. "A little," she admitted. He nodded. "So am I." The admission was simple, but it leveled something between them. Inside the apartment, new routines formed. Amara helped Lily with math homework during visits. She corrected Jonathan once on a misquoted statistic about public housing. He didn't argue. He listened. Gradually, something softened in him. Not performative humility. Genuine ECALABRATION. At a private board meeting weeks later, when an executive proposed tightening residency requirements in one of his developments, Jonathan interrupted. "What problem are we actually solving?" he asked. The room fell silent. It was a different tone than before. At home, Lily began referring to Amara casually. "When Amara comes over, when we go see Amara," as if the integration were natural, because to a child, it was. One evening, Jonathan found Amara asleep at the kitchen table, pencil still in hand, architectural sketches spread around her. He picked one up. It was a redesign of the overpass, community garden beneath it, lighting installations, small library kiosk. He stared at it for a long time. She wasn't erasing where she came from. She was reimagining it. And in doing so, she was quietly reshaping him. Do you believe one act of kindness can truly change an entire family? Autumn arrived softly in Brookdale. The air sharpened. Leaves gathered along sidewalks in amber drifts. The skyline shimmered under a colder sun, including the glass towers that once represented certainty to Jonathan Whitmore. But certainty had changed. 6 months after the accident, Jonathan stood at a podium in a conference hall bearing his company's name. This time, there was no defensive energy in the room, only anticipation. Behind him, projected on a large screen, was a simple title: The Whitmore Community Initiative. Amara sat in the second row beside Lily, hands folded tightly in her lap. She wore a navy dress borrowed from a school event, simple, understated. The crescent necklace rested against her collarbone as always. Cameras were present, but this wasn't spectacle. It was reckoning. Jonathan adjusted the microphone. He didn't begin with numbers. He began with the truth. 4 years, he said steadily. I believed I understood the causes of poverty. I believed I was defending stability and standards. I spoke with certainty. He paused, letting the weight settle. I was wrong. A murmur rippled through the room. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Reporters leaned forward. I built opinions from a distance, he continued. And distance is a poor substitute for understanding. His gaze moved toward Amara briefly, not for validation, but acknowledgement. 6 months ago, my daughter stepped into traffic. A young woman ran into that street without hesitation and saved her life. He inhaled. Slowly, that young woman came from the very communities I had criticized. Silence thickened, and she showed me something I had failed to see. Not weakness, not decline, but courage, discipline, intelligence. He gestured toward the screen. Today, we are launching a foundation dedicated to equitable housing development, academic scholarships for underserved youth, and community infrastructure investments, starting right here in Brookdale. Numbers followed, millions allocated, specific redevelopment plans, scholarship endowments. But what mattered most was not the funding. It was the shift in language. No mention of purity, no coded rhetoric about standards, only responsibility. After the conference ended, reporters swarmed with questions. Is this an apology tour? One asked sharply. No, Jonathan replied calmly. It's accountability. Outside, reactions were divided. Critics questioned motives. Supporters expressed confusion. But something deeper had already changed. Something no headline could fully capture. Later that evening, back at the modest apartment, Lily ran into the living room, holding a printed article. You're trending again, Daddy, she announced. Jonathan smiled faintly. I figured. Amara sat at the kitchen table, reviewing a letter she'd received earlier that week. She hadn't told Jonathan yet. She looked up. I got accepted, he stilled, to Brookdale State's pre-architecture program, with scholarship. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lily squealed and threw her arms around Amara. Jonathan's chest tightened, not with fear this time, but pride. You did that, he said quietly. She shook her head. I'd help. No, he corrected gently. You had an opportunity. You created the rest. The following week, Jonathan drove them both to the overpass. Construction fencing now lined part of the space. City permits had been approved. Plans were in motion to convert the area into a lit community space with transitional housing units nearby. Amara stepped out of the car slowly. The noise of traffic above felt different now, not threatening, but transitional. She walked toward the column where she used to sleep. The cardboard was gone. In its place stood survey markers and fresh chalk outlines. Jonathan joined her. You're not erasing it, he said quietly. You're transforming it, she nodded. I don't want kids here to feel invisible. He glanced at her. You're not invisible. She gave him a small smile. I know. That evening, as the sun dipped low, they stood at the same intersection where everything had changed. Cars flowed past. The traffic light shifted from red to green. Lily reached for both their hands. 3 silhouettes on a sidewalk, once defined by division. Jonathan looked down at Amara. I don't know what title fits, he admitted softly. Mentor feels incomplete. Guardian sounds possessive. She studied him. You don't need a title, she said. Just consistency. He nodded. Consistency. It was a quieter word than power, but far more permanent. Across the street, a young girl waited with her mother for the light to change. Amara watched her carefully, not out of fear, out of instinct. Some instincts, after all, never leave. The light turned green. They crossed together, full circle, but not back to where they started. Forward. Stronger. And forever changed. There are moments in life that split everything into before and after. For Jonathan Whitmore, it wasn't a boardroom decision. It wasn't a market crash. It wasn't a political confrontation. It was a child stepping into traffic. And a 16-year-old girl the world had overlooked choosing to run toward danger instead of away from it. Before that moment, Jonathan's world was built on elevation, penthouses, towers, exclusive developments rising above city streets. Stability, to him, meant separation. Protection meant distance. After that moment, stability meant something else. It meant listening. It meant humility. It meant recognizing that dignity does not depend on zip codes, and courage does not require wealth. Amara never asked to be a symbol. She never demanded repayment. She didn't lecture or protest or seek validation. She simply acted, instinctively, selflessly, because a child needed saving. And in doing so, she forced a man who had built empires to confront the architecture of his own beliefs. We often imagine change as loud. But real transformation is quiet at First. It begins with discomfort, with truth that stings. With the humility to say, I was wrong. Wealth did not save Lily that day. Power did not save her. Reputation did not save her. A girl with nothing, no security detail, no safety net, ran into traffic and chose humanity. And that single decision didn't just alter one afternoon. It reshaped a family. It redirected millions of dollars. It challenged a public narrative. It transformed a man who once spoke about purity into someone who now speaks about possibility. If this story touched you, let me know in the comments. And think about this. How many people do we pass every day without really seeing them? How many assumptions sit quietly inside us, untested, unchallenged? Sometimes the people we overlook carry the very lessons we need most. Stories like this take time and heart to create. If you want more stories that restore faith in humanity, consider subscribing, because in a world that often feels divided, it's worth remembering. Change is possible, but it usually begins where pride ends.